So the next part of this event is the panel discussion. So we'll start with the global panelists. So if you could each say something briefly about yourselves and which organization you're representing, that would be great. So Tim, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Tim. I'm from Germany originally and working for Students Organizing for Sustainability International. And we are a sort of global network of student-led organizations, mostly at a national or international level, and really trying to join forces across student-led networks to have more collective impact, amplify each other's campaigns.
Great. Thank you. And I think we've got Ankit as well. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Of course, thank you for having me. My name is Ankit. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a student from India, recent graduate of Canada, and here representing the Global Students Forum. The Global Student Forum, also known as GSF, is the international platform of student unions and organizations, ensuring that our voices actually reach international platforms and supporting our national and regional memberships as well. Looking forward to this discussion.
Great, thank you. And we've also got Rosemary again. So she is going to introduce herself as a panelist as well.
Yeah, hello. My name is Rosemary, and I'm the founder and chairperson of Climate Student Movement.
Great. Okay, so we'll get started then with the first question. And the first question I'll pose to Rosemary first, if you want to get started. And that is, why is it necessary for students to push HEIs to become climate leaders, do you think?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we already have this had this presentation talking about it, but just to dig a bit deeper into it. Yeah, students are the lifeblood of higher education institutions, and the universities are really dependent on the students. Yeah, want to study at the university and are yeah, think that their education is good and so on. So the voice of students has really got a lot of impact on university's development. And also, I think that students are well organized in student unions, and that gives us a good opportunity to yeah, be representatives in universities' yeah, committees and boards and so on. So we have a strong voice at university already. So I think that we can use that voice to impact HEIs at a bigger scale when it comes to their climate impact. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Tim, what would your response be to that question?
Yeah, I guess students are the biggest stakeholder group of a university. So if students with a common voice demand changes, then universities are usually quite responsive to that. That might depend a little bit per country, but especially in the UK, I think, where the higher education has become much more kind of marketized, and so the students are kind of like the consumers of the company. So they yeah, really need to respond to that demand. And yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to consider how if students are influencing their universities and they have that experience of actually being successful at that, that will also carry through into how they, just their attitude in life, basically, as they carry through into their careers. They have that experience of, you know, my social environment, my organizational environment is shapeable. I can have an impact on the surroundings. So I think that will also have a sort of knock-on effect on how they show up at work and in their communities, and just bringing that change-making ethos into different aspects of their lives.
Yeah, fantastic points. And Ankit, what would you say in response to that or to the question?
Yes, I mean, I think my colleagues have stated most of the core arguments. The other periphery arguments are essentially that higher education institutions themselves have a significant stake in climate change itself, not just climate change education, but how markets deal with climate change. movements in North America, which is my home student unions, called Occupy and Divest. And both of those had students organizing themselves in very effective hierarchies, ensuring that their demands were met. And Divest was specifically around the demand to get universities to move their endowments away from fossil fuels. Divest had a huge impact in how North American universities, and to a great extent Canadian universities and the universities that I have attended, how they deal with their endowments and their money. And that is just one of the small ways that these institutions can have an impact on climate change on a large scale. I think there's also another thing to consider. Education industry, if we consider it an industry, is huge. It is large and it is growing faster and faster as we talk, as demand for education and more diverse education increases across the world. And in this increasing demand, education institutions also become significant polluters. And so how education institutions deal with their capacities and how they might pollute and how they might impact their local environment is also a small brick, let's say, in the huge palace of climate change.
Yeah, fantastic. So all of those responses are really interesting in thinking about not only climate education, but the climate issue as something that's very fast paced, but also very shapeable as well. Brilliant. Okay, so our next question is, working together as international student organizations, how can we make our campaigns successful, do you think? So if we mix it up a bit, Tim, do you want to start with this one first? Oh, I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, I guess it's mainly about having the leverage of numbers. So just having a lot of international student organizations signing up to the campaign and really showing that we have an aligned vision and that we're kind of behind the same demands. And yeah, I think the science piece is definitely a key leverage point. And I think that's something to still kind of figure out a bit further, like what does it actually mean to have like science-based demands? The way I understood that this is also what would differentiate this campaign from the climate letter from what was it now, the Race to Zero. Yeah, and I think implementation capacity is definitely a key point. Like oftentimes these kind of really ambitious ideas can suffer from implementation when there's too much kind of volunteer work and then people burn out. And so we also need to make sure that people are well resourced and take care of their personal well-being, and ideally get some financial backing for the campaign sooner than later.
Yeah, exactly. So we want our campaign to be sustainable as well, don't we? Yeah, fantastic. And Ankit, what would you say in response to that question?
I think there's some experience that the fellow student and climate organizers bring to the stage. And this is my appeal to you if you want to become a national coordinator or a climate campaign coordinator for CSM. The three movements, the three ways in which student organizations have achieved the vast levels of organizing capacity that we have is that we follow three particular steps. We work locally, as in we make sure that students on the ground see our work and get to interact with it. They feel involved and they understand that they have a stake. Then we act nationally, because a lot of these policies are implemented on larger scales and require large scale responses. There's often sometimes there's a wildcat strike or rally, or sometimes there's an uncoordinated rally at one university or one institution that gets a lot of media coverage, but their policy impact is often minimal. The most impactful rallies, organizing, and actions are often coordinated properly across the political board that you have, nationally or provincially if you're in Canada, and mobilize internationally. And that's what we're doing here. We're mobilizing internationally to make sure that the stakeholders from across the world actually come together and understand how can we all help and empower each other's struggles. And then there's obviously, the basics of organizing: educate, agitate, and organize. And I'm sure all of this will be included in the academy that CSM has to offer for all of you that apply. So I'm looking forward to seeing, to making sure that this campaign is successful and how all of you take stake in it.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, really, really useful to think about the organisation, the implementation of it. Rosemary, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I would like to say that we in Climate Student Movement, we are really a small organization when it comes to active volunteers working with the campaign, and also the size of our numbers. So I really think that we can reach out to a higher number of students through our collaboration with a Global Student and SOS Student Organizing for Sustainability. And so we have formed a coalition, a campaign coalition together as international organizations, and also including global students, regional federations. And we hope that we can get invited to your events as well, and that we can have events together. The timeline is to launch the campaign in January. Also, we hope now during November, December, before the official launch in January, that we can develop the campaign framework together, and also how we can, during the campaign next year, that we can also develop, hopefully, an international climate action paper for higher education institutions. That would be wonderful, and also an international ranking for higher education institutions. So we think with the framework, the action paper, and the ranking, that we have good resources to both educate students in how they can push their university even more, but also that we can be a strong voice on the international arena when it comes to advocating for example, the Race to Zero campaign. If we can impact them to have more science-based targets, that would be wonderful and amazing. And I think there is other such international campaigns that includes businesses and the academy sectors and so on, that we can have an influence on. So that is our hope with this campaign as well.
Thank you, Rosemary. Okay, I'm just aware of time, so for the last question, if we have it more quick fire round, but on the flip side of what we've just been talking about, what challenges do you foresee for our campaign? Any limitations? And do you have any ideas as to how we could overcome them as well? So if we start with Ankit.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the primary limitations and challenges that you're going to face on the ground is that you will find that the university administrators are the reservoir of apathy. They don't want to do things that they haven't decided on already. So getting them to mobilize on things that are in favor of students and that students have a stake in requires a significant amount of effort. So do not back away from taking on the challenge and really, really ruffling some feathers if you have to, which you will have to. And then the other thing is addressing the various gaps that exist within the institutions of universities that allow the administrators to do whatever they want. There's often a huge gap between the students that organize and student workers that organize and the professors that organize and other campus labor that organize, and they don't often work together. So as campus-based coalitions, building those very successful and densely working coalitions would be a primary target. And that's how I foresee all of many of these challenges being overcome.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tim, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I would say what I mentioned earlier with the Race to Zero's climate letter, that you want to avoid that people think, okay, we already have this huge global coalition with maybe similar demands, so to what extent is this like duplicating efforts? So to just have a clear communication on how this is adding to what's already going on and creating synergies, and has a more science-based approach perhaps, and to really ensure that this campaign is being taken seriously by institutions, and for that, I'd imagine to also get the support from researchers like Scientists for Futures, or staff, and maybe even companies who are really backing the campaign. So it's perceived as student-led, but backed by various stakeholder groups.
Yeah, fantastic. So this idea of credibility as well to back the campaign. And Rosemary, very quickly, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I have the example when we build the campaign in Sweden. So already from the beginning, we started to collaborate with the sustainability managers, and they were really afraid that they will even get fired if they demanded science-based targets. But when they felt that they had their students on their back, they could be more brave. So I think that this is really about helping the managers that already is engaged in environment and climate, and they want to see a more sustainable world, but they are a bit afraid to take these bold steps. So if we can encourage them and really say that you have the student on your back, be brave, I think that they can take these steps together with students to push on the universities, committee and boards to also be brave. Because it's both it's a bit scary actually to do this, and I think that we also from the beginning we started to collaborate with scientists. So I think that having both the student and the managers and the scientists on the same page, communicating the same message, is really strong. So what I like to finish with is that I am personally very inspired by Christiana Figueres and her message to be a stubborn optimist and take this step by step. So I think that we really can take this step by step and learn during this process from each other, and using the strength of being in a network. And can we create this international network? I think that we can make stronger national networks and local networks. So that is my hope with this campaign.
Great, thank you. So we'll say goodbye to our global panelists for now. Thank you all for speaking. It was really interesting and helpful.